What's up, guys? Just want to make this quick pre video pre advertisement show. Like always, Smart Soap is our sponsor today, and you can see their ad here. Thank you, Smart Soap, for sponsoring this video. Much appreciated to you guys. As always, links in the description box down below. Please check them out. They do support the show, but don't worry, no added cost to you guys. They are a soap company. Shocker. And they basically help guys like me who are both martial artists and lifters to basically keep clean. Obviously, if you're a martial artist, you don't know who has what. You're sweating everywhere. Same thing with lifting too. You don't know who, like, which sweaty person touched what, and yeah, it keeps you safe. It keeps you clean, and it keeps you safe from ringworm and like other stuff that could actually be, number one, contagious. Number two, be very harmful for you and other people. So just stay safe. And like I said, it's a great soap company. I actually personally use this, so I can actually tell from experience that, hey, this is something that you should definitely check out. But as always, thank you for listening, and here is your podcast. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode on this channel. I am the Rhino. Unfortunately, the bat is busy today. He got some stuff to do. Today, I have a guest, Mr. Aaron Beam. Mr. Aaron Beam is the former CFO of Health South Fund or Health South Group back in the late 80s, 90s. And yeah, Mr. Beam, thank you for being on the show.
Okay, it's good to be here.
Cool. How are you doing today? Let's start off with an easy question.
Doing real good. Everything's fine for a pandemic.
That's good. So as I mentioned before, you were the first CEO of Health South, correct?
CFO,
yes.
Chief Financial Officer.
CFO, sorry, my apologies.
CFO.
Yes. So how would you explain your experience at Health South for those of us who may not know you prior to the issue that came about?
Okay. Well, I was a founder of the company along with 4 other guys.
Mm-hmm.
We started the company in 1984. We raised venture capital, and within less than 3 years, in 1986, we filed to go public.
Mm-hmm.
Our business was healthcare, particularly rehabilitation,
mm-hmm.
Outpatient rehab hospitals, and we also did outpatient surgery business.
Cool.
And so that's was our business. Well, we went public in 1986.
Mm-hmm.
And by 1995, we were the largest company in the state of Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
We were operating in all 50 states. We had almost 50,000 employees. We owned more outpatient centers, more surgery centers, and more rehab hospitals than any other company in the United States. And we were 350th on the Fortune 500 list. And I was a millionaire several times over.
That's very cool. So obviously you helped grow, or at least we're part of the group that helped grow Health South into a multi-million-dollar, multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. What happened that led to the fraud scandals in the late 90s, early 2000s, and what happened since, if you don't mind me asking?
Okay. Well, really one word, and that word is greed. my boss, Richard Scrushy, who was the CEO, uh, wanted to be a billionaire.
Right.
And in 1995, I estimated that he was worth about $600 million. And it was primarily due to stock options. He received stock options from his board of directors.
Right.
And in 1997, he was the highest paid executive in the United States. He
Right.
took home $110 million in that 1 year.
Wow,
And
that's a lot of money.
a lot of money. And so he just really was obsessed with being a very, very rich man. And he was a very talented guy. I mean, he really was the person that had the idea to start the company. He picked the type of business we were in. He was considered by Wall Street as just a visionary and excellent guy. But like I say, he wanted to be a billionaire. And after being in a company for about 5 years, uh, it got to where it was hard to deliver the numbers that he was promising Wall Street.
Right.
It wasn't like we were doing badly, that our business went south or anything like that. We actually were doing very well. But he had stock options. I don't know how much you know about this kind of thing, but the board of directors gave him stock options, which is the right to buy stock typically for 10 years at a fixed price.
Right.
So say your stock is trading at $20 a share today. The board could say, okay, we're going to give you the right to buy 1 million shares for the next 10 years at $20, which is, and so you got 10 years to, and that's very common. All major publicly held companies issue stock options, and it's a way to compensate people. And
Cool.
he would tell the stock analysts, he would give them a very rosy earning projections so they would keep a strong buy on our stock. And so it got to where we just couldn't deliver the numbers that he was promising Wall Street. Again, I want to emphasize, it wasn't like we started doing badly.
Right.
It's just that he simply promised more earnings than we could deliver to keep the stock price up.
Okay.
So
he basically inflated the value of the company more than it was actually doing.
Yeah, that's right. He said we're going to make more money than we actually, our projection said we're going to make.
Okay.
So after doing everything I could in terms of accounting tricks, so to speak, I felt like we just couldn't keep, delivering the numbers. So in the second quarter of 1996, I went into his office with my chief accountant and told him that we had to report numbers below street expectations.
Okay.
And he turned red and he started trembling. He said, "Get out of my office. Have you guys lost your minds? We are not going to report numbers below street expectations. If we do, the stock is going to crash. We'll be sued. Your stock options will be worthless. You won't be the rock stars in Birmingham anymore." He said, "You need to get back in your office and get these numbers to where they need to be." He said, "Here's the problem. You guys have gotten lazy. You know how to fix these numbers. You fixed them before. Get back in your office and get these numbers to where they need to be." And he wouldn't let us leave. He just kept screaming at us, telling us that we could not report numbers below street expectations.
Okay.
So finally, my chief accountant said, "Look, we have 1,500 operating units. That means we have 1,500 sets of books." He said, I can make entries small enough. We actually have 1,500 locations throughout the United States, and one in Australia and a few other places. But he said, I can make entries small enough, and I used to work for our auditors, and I know they won't look at these entries, and I will make hundreds of these entries, and I will get the numbers where they need to be. But he said, now, Richard, Aaron, I'll be crediting revenue we never generated, and on the balance sheet, I'll be debiting assets we do not have. In other words, he just said, I'll be making up the numbers. Richard thought about it for a little bit. Richard's my boss.
Mhm.
And he said, guys, this is our best option. Well, nobody will lose their job. Stockholders won't get hurt. And you guys know everybody does this kind of thing. I did not have the courage to stand up to Richard and say no. He always carried a gun in his briefcase. He was a very scary person, to say the least. And I didn't have the courage to stand up to him and say no. So that night, I let my accountant cook the books. That's kind of the slang term for fraudulently making financial statements. So that night, he phonied up the books. The next day, go ahead.
Sorry, it's okay. Go ahead.
The next day when I went into work, I felt like people were staring at me. I felt like I had blood on my hands. I didn't realize what doing that would change me. I mean, I felt guilty. I had terrible. I hated going to work and everything. He said we'd only do it one time. We'll just get through this lean spot. We'll only do it one time. He said, I'll cut costs. I'll start selling some of our jet airplanes and that kind of thing. And I'll get the numbers to where they need to be. And so it didn't work. We did it again the next quarter. You report earnings every quarter. 1996 ended. This was in the summer of 1996 when it started. 1996 ended. The auditors did not detect the fraud, and 1997 was beginning.
Okay.
And we begged Richard, please tell Wall Street, tell the analysts we're going to have a down year. Not that we're going to be losing money or anything, but we're just not going to make as much money as we have been making. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't do it. He promised the Wall Street analysts earnings that I knew we could not achieve in 1997. In the first quarter of 1997, we'd missed the numbers pretty badly. And by now, I think 6 people in the company knew about the fraud. We met with Richard and we decided to cook the books again, first quarter 1997. At the end of the meeting, he made eye contact with us, all 7 of us, and he said, look, or 6 guys really. He made eye contact with us and he said, look, if we're ever caught, I'm going to deny everything. He says, I don't know. Yeah, he said, I will. Yeah, basically, he said, I will deny everything. He says, I don't know what your game plan is, but I will deny everything.
So basically, he sent you guys up a creek without a paddle.
Yeah, because he said he would deny it all, so we'd be hung out there to dry,
Right.
So
my question at this point would be like, why didn't you or one of your fellow accountants or fellow coworkers who knew the fraud become a whistleblower, like just say, hey, we're doing something illegal. Here's the books. You didn't get this from me, kind of thing.
Because you'd have to understand Richard Scrushy. He's a very, very intimidating guy.
Right.
And when he said, I will deny everything, he was saying, you guys cross me, I'll bring more lawyers, guns, and money to the party than you will. In other words, he said, I will deny it. And so he just, like you said, he hung us out there. And we had already participated in the fraud. We'd already cooked the book, so we couldn't act like we hadn't done something,
Right.
Now, I wasn't savvy enough to realize that maybe I could have gone to the government and copped a deal and said, look, here's what's going on. I'll tell you everything, but I want immunity from being prosecuted by the government. I didn't, I just wasn't that kind of guy. I didn't know how to, I didn't even know I could do that. You know, I didn't think about it. So, long story short, uh, in the summer of 1997, I left the company.
Right.
I told Richard that I'd made enough money, um, and that I was 10 years older than Richard. So in 1997, I left the company. Now, back to the whistleblowing thing. Whistleblowers a lot of times aren't treated very well.
Okay.
People deny what the whistleblower is saying, and it comes down to he said, she said kind of thing. So I didn't want to be the whistleblower. I didn't want to go through all that. So I just left the company in the hope that somehow I'd escape the problem. So I left the company. I moved to South Alabama. I bought a very nice hunk of land. I built myself a very nice house. Keep in mind now, I'm a millionaire. So
Right.
I left the company, money intact, and um, about a year after I'd retired, Richard called me. He said, "Why don't you come have lunch with me in Birmingham? I want to talk to you." So I drove the 200 miles up to Birmingham, Alabama, had lunch with him in his private dining room.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Aaron, come back to work." He said, "We're making our numbers fine now." He said, "You don't need to worry about that." And I told him no. And I went back home. 1998 passed, 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002. But in the spring of 2003, it was April, it was March 19th, 2003. I turned on my TV set to watch the evening news, and the announcer came on and said, "We opened tonight's news with a breaking story out of Birmingham, Alabama. Massive accounting fraud uncovered at HealthSouth. It's estimated that there's almost $3 billion worth of bogus numbers on their books." I might have just sort of passed out. Uh, I had wanted to believe the fraud had stopped. Richard said it had. I broke off all contact with the company when I left, and I really did not know it was still going on and that it had grown to be such a large fraud. In fact, it's probably the third or fourth largest accounting fraud in the history of the United States.
Third or fourth?
Yeah, largest ever.
Holy.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. $3 billion. So,
and that's one the top, possibly the top four. And well, I don't
yeah,
want
Enron, WorldCom are larger, but HealthSouth is right under there. Now, Bernie Madoff had a bigger Ponzi scheme than that, but as far as accounting frauds, this was one of the largest in the history of the United States.
Oh,
So,
wow. Saying a lot.
yeah. So the next day in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, uh, the attorney with the federal government in Birmingham, Alabama, said that several people had come forward and admitted their involvement in the fraud, but we know of other people who were involved, and if you're one of those people, you should come forward. And I thought her next sentence was going to be, "Aaron Bean, give us a call." But anyway, I called around, hired a criminal attorney in Mobile, Alabama, told him over the phone my situation. He said, "Okay, Mr. Bean, let me call the feds in Birmingham. I'll call you back before the end of the day." About 2 hours later, he called back and he said, "Oh, yeah, Mr. Bean, they want to talk to you. You need to be in my office at 8 o'clock in the morning." So my wife and I drove to downtown Mobile the next morning, and the first thing he said was, "Do not lie to me. Do not lie to the federal government. Your former employees have told them, have told the FBI that you were involved, and the FBI has seized the HealthSouth building. If you try to lie your way out of this, you're going to go to prison for a long time."
Pretty much to the day
So,
after tomorrow, forever.
yeah, yeah. So, 3 days later, I was in a federal building in Birmingham, Alabama,
Right.
and I'm sitting across the table from two FBI agents, two agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission, a whole room full of lawyers. I'm under oath. It's tape recorded. It lasted all day. And I didn't feel like I did very well because they wanted me to remember details back to 1996. And this is 2003. But at the end of the day, the FBI agent said, Mr. Bean, we know a lot about this case. And from what we can tell today, you've been telling the truth. He said, so far, 17 people have come forward and admitted their involvement in the fraud and pled guilty as you have today.
Mm-hmm.
Only one key person denies knowing anything about it, Richard Scrushy.
I was about to
And
guess that.
we will have to take Mr. Scrushy to trial, and we will want you to be a witness. Now, I didn't have to go to trial. I had pled guilty. So I was waiting for a federal judge to sentence me.
Mm-hmm.
But he would not sentence me until the Scrushy trial was over, and it didn't begin for 2 years. So I had 2 years that were very dark. I knew I had 5, 10, maybe 15 years of prison time hanging over my head. Health South stock had gone down to 8 cents.
Oh,
Investors lost billions, not millions, but billions of dollars.
Oh, where
In
was
my
it? If you don't mind me asking, I do apologize for my interruption, but where was it? Where was the stock price before this whole scandal took place?
It was in around the $20 mark. It went down to 8
Oh,
cents. Yeah,
that's a big loss.
yeah, a big loss. Um, so anyway, I knew I could go to prison. I knew that my attorney said they're going to take restitution against you. The government's going to look at your personal balance sheet, and because the stockholders lost money, they're going to seize your assets. So now, during that time, the 2 years until the trial started, the trial didn't start until 2005, and this is 2003. So I had 2 years, my wife and I, that were very dark.
Mm-hmm.
But during that time, Richard did some interesting things. He left the church that he'd been attending and he joined an inner city church. He then purchased a small television station in Birmingham, and every morning at 8 o'clock, he began preaching the gospel on television.
Okay.
And he would have other ministers on there with him and would preach the gospel. He spent $20 million on his legal team. He hired 7 different law firms. He hired a jury selection firm to handpick the jury. He had a publicist. And when the trial started in Birmingham, Alabama, he never entered the courtroom that he didn't have a Bible in his hand. And at the end of the week, they'd hold prayer service on the courtyard steps. And I thought it was kind of silly. He was obviously trying to taint the jury pool, and I felt like it wouldn't work. Now, the government wanted me to be the first witness. They felt like I was very professor-like, and I could explain to the jurors this is a financial crime. So they've got to understand what stock options are, what are earnings per share, what is all this about. They got me on the stand, excuse me, the first day, and they're falling asleep. The jury's falling asleep while I'm explaining this stuff to them.
Okay.
That night on television, one of Richard's attorneys said they were just going to make it fun for the jury. They weren't going to try to bore them with that kind of stuff. So the next day he got me on the stand. He said, Mr. Bean, when you went to New York City and met with investors, you lied. Mr. Bean, when you presented the numbers to the stockholders and the board of directors and the outside auditors, you lied. Mr. Bean, you are a cheat. You are a liar. You lie so much you don't know when you're telling the truth. I looked over at the jurors and their eyes were big as saucers. They were paying attention. It was very entertaining to have this lawyer call me a cheat and a liar. The trial lasted 6 months. The jury deliberated 6 weeks. The verdict was not guilty, all charges. Richard walked out of the courtroom a free man. So he was found not guilty. Why was he found not guilty? Well, the it worked. He had handpicked the jury. He just in trials like this, one of the things you have to understand about juries today, they've seen so much stuff on television, such CIs, SCI and all those television shows. So to them, evidence is blood spatter, fingerprints, DNA, emails. That's evidence. And his lawyer said there's no evidence tying Mr. Scrushy to the fraud. Only these felons, like Mr. Beam, who are known felons, pled guilty. And they've cut a deal with the government to get a light sentence. And they're lying through their teeth. And Mr. Scrushy is an innocent man. He knew nothing about this fraud. So it worked. It worked. The jury bought it. They said Scrushy was an innocent man. The jurors, the ones they interviewed, said there was just not enough evidence tying Mr. Scrushy to this fraud. So he left. Now, the story goes on. Now, long story short, I only got 3 months in federal prison, but I did have to auction off my home, sell off all my assets, and today I do public speaking for a living. I don't have any wealth to speak of now. I used to drive, I had 4 or 5 homes and lots of cars and everything, but all that's gone. I had to give that up when I pled guilty. Now, Scrushy was sued by the stockholders in a civil suit. And in a civil case, the proof is lower than it is in a criminal case. And Richard was found guilty of the fraud civilly. And the judge awarded the stockholders $2.7 billion, the largest judgment against an individual in the history of the United States.
That's a lot of money.
Also, while Richard was still at HealthSouth, he had bribed the governor of Alabama to get HealthSouth. Gave the governor $500,000. The governor got reelected, and Richard got approval to build a hospital, for state approval to build a hospital. The federal government said that was a bribe, and they took the governor and Scrushy to trial, and they were found guilty. And Richard did go to prison for 5 years.
Okay.
And while he was in prison, since he had lost the civil suit, they seized his assets while he was in prison. Now, he got out of prison after serving 5 years. He's living in Houston, Texas now. And I don't know if you've seen it. This might be why you called me, but Netflix called me about 2 years ago and said they wanted to do a documentary on Richard Scrushy, and would I want to participate in it? And I said, sure. So they interviewed me for the movie. And in May of this year, May of 2020, Netflix delivered 6 documentaries, and they were called Trial by Media, trials that they believe were influenced by the media. And episode 4 is King Richard. He was called King Richard. That was his nickname. But it's on Netflix if you want to watch it. Go to Netflix documentaries, Trial by Media, episode 4, and it totally explains how he was found not guilty. And it's very interesting, very entertaining thing.
Right.
Thing you have to realize in a trial, defense attorneys are not looking for the truth. They are not looking for the truth. They have one job: keep their client out of prison. So they do everything they can to discredit the witnesses, and that's the way it works. So be sure and watch that Netflix after. I mean, you might want to do it after you finish this interview with me, and this will all kind of make more sense to you. But today, I've been out of prison since 2005. I've spoken to over 100 different universities. In fact, I'm giving a Zoom presentation to a university tomorrow. I've written 2 books, HealthSouth, The Wagon to Disaster. And then I've written another book called Ethics Playbook. I do podcasting. I talk about ethics. And when I'm speaking to students and different groups, my message is about how to be ethical, how not to get caught up in a fraud like HealthSouth and that kind of thing. So very quickly, I've told you my whole life history here, but what else do you want to ask about this?
I kind of what you were saying towards the end there. Moving forward, what advice would you give to someone who's already established a business and like to prevent them from following in the same or at least the similar footsteps as you did?
Okay. Here's the thing about fraud in business. Did you hear about the Wells Fargo thing? Wells Fargo.
I actually, believe it or not, I actually I read that in my ethics class during my MBA this quarter.
Okay. So if you've had an ethics class, you understand that when you're out in the business world, there are ethical landmines out there every day where you can. Not all frauds are really done out of greed. Sometimes people do it to try to help their company by not exposing a dangerous product, or maybe they lie about their product or whatever. There's all kinds of ways to be unethical other than just out and out stealing money. And my message is I speak to a lot of accounting majors in college, and I try to explain to them that when they get out of in the real world, there will be ethical issues, and they need to always be aware of the kind of things. And they need to study case studies, Enron, WorldCom, Tyco, HealthSouth, understand how these frauds happen so you can prevent getting caught up in one of these frauds.
Okay. So obviously to everyone watching here on YouTube, I'll link to Mr. Bean's website down below in the description box if you want to check out any of the books or the podcast that he mentioned earlier.
Please do that. I would appreciate that very much. And it's just aaronbean.net, and you can click on listen to podcast. And I think I've got about 35 of them up now. Yeah. And I interview accounting professors and all kinds of people that are FBI agents that are involved in investigating these types of frauds. So pretty interesting podcast.
I guess the last question I have for you, sir, is with all your experience from day one to now, do you regret your actions and do you wish that you could have done things differently?
Of course I regret my actions. Today I am considered a felon. I'll be considered a felon the rest of my life. I lost all of my money that I made. And I cost people millions and millions of dollars when the stock crashed. So I have a lot of guilt about that, and I feel badly about it. So no, I regret what I did. I wish I could do it over, but you can't you can't undo something like this. And I believe my speaking to students about ethics and trying to coach them up to not go down the path I went is the way. And today I feel my wife and I celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary this June. And 50 years I've been married. So a lot of, I'm healthy. So other than the pandemic, and I just went through a hurricane down here, I lost power to my house for 6 or 7 days, but other than a hurricane and the pandemic, I'm doing okay.
That's
if you can plug me a little bit on your podcast, if I get a speaking gig because of your podcast, I'll send you a royalty check.
Thank you so much for that opportunity, sir.
Okay.
Maybe actually, as I mentioned before, I'm currently getting my MBA from Santa Clara University.
I've spoken at Santa Clara.
Nice.
I've spoken there twice.
Nice.
I've spoken at Stanford too, and Menlo College. You know Menlo College?
Yes, I do.
I've spoken at all 3 of those schools.
Nice. And actually, the reason I contacted you in the first place was because this was it Thursday night, this past Thursday, my professor actually said, "Hey, I want you to write a 4-page paper on Health South." So it's like, you know what? I'll send a cold email to you, and I wasn't expecting you to reply to me at all. So I
No,
thought
no.
it's like, oh my god, he replied. So I was like, I was freaking out because I was so happy because I got to not
Yeah.
only do a paper on what happened on all for the ethics class, but I got to get to talk to you in person. So I really appreciate you coming on the show, sir. I
Okay.
really do.
Good. To help you write the paper, there's a lot of YouTube video out there of me speaking and all. In fact, the speech that I gave at Stanford University is on YouTube.
Oh, nice.
So yeah. So if you, I also did a YouTube or a presentation with a public television station,
Okay.
and you ought to be able to find that. There's a lot. I'm very Googleable. There's a lot of stuff out there on me. So if you
I
to
don't know
write
if
your
that's a good thing
paper,
or a bad thing.
yeah. But if you need any other information to help you write your paper, what's the name of your professor? I might know him.
His name is Professor Vasquez.
That's now. Uh, there's
Unfortunately,
several. There's a yeah.
unfortunately, I
There's
don't know his name.
yeah. Anyway, but I know the school well. It's beautiful campus, beautiful school, and Stanford's a great school. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Okay. Well, good.
I guess we'll end it here today. To everyone who's watching it here on YouTube, you can find everything down below. Like I said before, I'll link to Mr. Bean's website so you can contact him directly or check out his books. And thank you to Spar Soap for sponsoring this video. Much appreciated, you guys. As always, have a good one. See you in the next video. Peace.
Okay. All right.